Welcome everyone to the Keys and Yoga podcast, a little solo episode for me today, which are shorter, but more intense perhaps, or at least they're intensely focused on one subject. And today's subject is the use of touch as a physical modality in yoga. So I think very interesting, very close to all our hearts. And I think in the modern context, it's changed. Perhaps the roots of the modern yoga class being in the 60s when people were rather free about touch. It was really a liberating qualification around our being, that we were freer around touch, that it was a different age basically. And now boundaries have tightened, not saying rightly or wrongly. The individual has defined themselves in a different way. Our personal sovereignty and autonomy over our bodies has been understood by us in a different way, and touch is a lot more problematic and somewhat contentious or frightening even issue especially amongst yoga teachers. Touch someone in the wrong way, not that you're touching on purpose in the wrong way, but that if someone construes your touch in the wrong way, that can end your career these days. So I was started to think, along with many other yoga teachers, I think, that maybe it wasn't worth using touch at all. And certainly teaching an average Friday 7 p.m. Ashtanga class at a yoga center, I wouldn't use touch. If it was just a random drop-in class with all different people coming through, I would lead it from the front and I wouldn't touch. Only when you've got your own class and you're working with people you know, I think, is it these days especially worth introducing the modality of touch into teaching, which is so particular in Ashtanga yoga anyway. And I think it's less so in other types of yoga, but to lose it in Ashtanga would be to lose a lot, too much, I think. And, I was thinking about it. I have to say, I was thinking maybe touch is outmoded. Maybe it's not worth it anymore. Maybe it's too risky, too problematic to touch people who you don't know what they've experienced previously, how they're going to take your touch, what it means to them. It's not worth the risk. And then I did a podcast with Bessel van der Kolk, and he's very famous these days from his book, The Body Keeps the Score, which suddenly kind of came to huge popularity during the pandemic, but he wrote it many years before that. Anyway, and I said this to Bessel. I said, maybe touch is too worrying really to offer to people that we don't know. It might re-traumatize them if you've already had negative experiences of touch. To be touched by a strange yoga teacher may not help you. And he said, look, you get rid of touch. He said, you can't afford to get rid of touch because people need to heal from negative touch by positive touch. And if you don't get the positive touch, then you never fully heal from the negative touch. Now, we could say that, and this is an interesting point, I think. We could say that, we don't need to be touched by random strangers in a yoga class to heal from our touch, our negative experiences of touch. And so many of us have been somewhat abused by touch, to varying degrees, of course. Yeah? And we don't need to risk being touched by a random stranger. Why can't we be touched by a loved one to heal from touch? Well, yes, there is that, of course. Some of us don't have loved ones, though. And more than that, there's this interesting proposition that somehow touch offered by a stranger can be deeply healing. Imagine a massage now. Imagine you're having a massage, right? And you then become friends with the masseur. Changes everything, right? When you don't know the person, but they seem kind and you feel secure and safe around this experience, but you don't know them. Somehow, maybe it's just me, you can kind of let go to that. But when you know the person, then there's a relationship, and then the touch changes. It's somewhat, I wouldn't say it's necessarily got strings attached, but there's a certain then set of expectations around the touch. So there's a liberating quality in the touch offered by the yoga teacher, perhaps, that one doesn't know so well. But obviously it's also very problematic in as much as easy for abuse. And another reason why touch in the modern context has been so so worrying these days is because, well, in the 60s, we hadn't got all these abuses of power, abuses of touch by the teachers, by the gurus, and now we have. And what do we do with that? Well, the obvious solution is just, well, saying no more touching, because this is exerting power over another's body, and we can't afford to do that, even if it might have some positives. It's got too many risks associated. It's not worth the balance of it altogether. Well, as I said, I offered that to Bethel, and he didn't agree. And latterly, I suppose I don't either. But it is a risky and contentious subject for the yoga teacher to offer touch. As I said, it can easily be construed in the wrong way, and that is really a problem if someone does construe your touch in the wrong way. But how can we safeguard it then? How can we continue with touch if we need it, but yet safeguard the student from the possible abuses of touch by the teacher, and safeguard the teacher from being misconstrued and accused by the student? I'm not saying accused unnecessarily, because, of course, we all have experiences inside us, and how we construe the world depends on those experiences. So if you've been traumatized by touch and you're touched, even if it is a completely innocuous, completely innocent touch, it may not feel like that to you. Yeah. So it's not to say that people's experiences aren't correct, but how can we somewhat safeguard the whole area so we keep the modality of touch, which is, after all, the definitive aspect of Ashtanga yoga, really, is that it, I don't know about other yogas so much. Iyengar yoga uses touch in terms of alignment. That's the only other real experience of a style of yoga I've got. But Ashtanga, it really was the fundamental defining aspect of the method. And we'll come back to that in a second, because that also involves the physical use of touch and adjustments, in physically adjusting the body, which is potentially a different worry about touch. Because so far I've been really talking about the emotional problems of touch, right? Being touched in a way that doesn't feel right on an emotional level. But of course, we could also be touched in a way that is physically bad, injurious, doesn't feel physically right as well. And that does often happen in Ashtanga as well. I know I'm always banging on about that too, but I'll come to that in a second. So protecting touch, how do we do it? Because of course, we could say, well, we don't touch anymore. And one argument for that would be that, well, now everyone feels free to come to yoga class, because certain people that might not be able to come to yoga class because they're too afraid of being touched. And now, well, if they know they're not going to be touched, well, they can. Well, there's in a similar way, the consent cards, right? Where they say, well, perhaps you don't want to be touched, so you just put the consent card. It's a little card. It says, I don't know exactly what it says. It probably is worded differently in different studios. Not all studios have them, but a card you put by your mat, it says, I'm happy to be adjusted or touched, and I don't want any assistance, physical assistance. So is that was another possibility. So no touch is a possibility. The consent cards, or the teacher asking verbally every time they want to adjust or assist someone. How would you like to be assisted, or can I assist you? Yeah. Now, all of those have pluses and minuses. The drawback, I suppose, is that, well, if you've been in any way abused by touch, the likelihood is you're just going to try and safeguard yourself from any form of touch then. So you'll put the consent card saying no. You probably won't, would rather that there was just no touch in yoga classes, make it easier. And that always somewhat rankles as a solution, because I feel it doesn't work quite, because those people that might need that healing touch the most, therefore always have a way out of not receiving it through fear. And although it's understandable, and although it also, on the other side of the argument, allows those people to come to class that might be put off or might not even come to class through the worry of it, it also perhaps stops them ever being helped to heal through touch. So I'm not sure about it. As I say, I haven't got the solution, but we'll toss a few things over together here. And that the idea of asking the student each time, yes and no, I think it's very sensible to take feedback from people that you're helping, right? As a teacher, I think you can get a vibe of the person, how they want, or if they want help. Yeah. I'm not sure we need to do it orally all the time. I think introducing the question all the time, do you want to be touched, breaks up somewhat the connection, and also problematizes again, puts a lot of fear in the idea. Or as a student, I would think, oh, do I want, should I be worried about the touch? It kind of introduces this question in the first place. And then also, it's not a level playing field. If the teacher asks the student, can I touch you? And the student says no. Well, one, it takes bravery on the student's part. I'm not sure I would say no to a teacher, of any caliber, let alone a well-known one, for example. Yeah. Because it's not a level playing field. The teacher here is in a position of authority at the time. So you don't necessarily have the confidence. So although you might want to say no, you don't. So that doesn't work either in my mind, because it takes a lot of courage to be honest. And you also risk jeopardizing your relationship with a teacher by saying no. Yeah, they don't always like it. I've had my experiences myself of this, right? So it's difficult. How would I mean, I was going to approach this matter later, but we'll go for it now. So having offered the difficulties of safeguarding touch, how would I do it? How would I safeguard touch further? Well, one, introducing mentoring into the equation, that all teachers have a mentor. So there's some kind of person monitoring their action. And I think that every profession, apart from yoga teachers, really has a mentor. And it's the one profession that really is most vulnerable, and is most liable to cause harm, really. Well, not the most liable, but in dealing with so many people in emotional states, day in, day out, it's unbelievable that the yoga teacher does not have any overseeing, any consistent mentoring program, that they're just thrown out there after their generally insubstantial YTT. So there's that. And the centre, I think also the centre needs to take more of a role here in making sure that they get feedback from the students, right? They're initiating consistent feedback. How is the class? Fill in this form, this anonymous form at the desk, consistently making sure that they have a whole range of people feedbacking. Yeah. So those are two suggestions I would make, because, I mean, after all, if the teacher is going to abuse with touch in that way, no consent card or anything like that is going to stop them doing that, because, that unfortunately they are in that position and I feel that, that won't be enough. So how do we do that? I mean, ultimately we can, if anything is healing, it has a risk. So we can never completely, unless we remove touch altogether, get rid of the risk of the abuses of touch, but we could also keep trying to minimize it. I'm not saying consent cards don't work or I'm in disagreement with them, but they're not the only solution, and they have their drawbacks. But I think that I can't see that yoga will be better without touch, and I think it'll be massively reduced as a modality without touch, because it's an energy practice after all, and the energy is inside us. It's not verbal. Yep, it's physical, it's embodied, and the medium of touch, as they say, a picture paints 1,000 words, and just being touched in an endorsing, affirmative way, objective care by another person, can do more than any physical assist or cue can ever do. Yeah? So how would I then qualify good touch? Well, it has to feel okay. Because if the touch doesn't feel okay, by the way, that's the most obvious litmus test. That's the most obvious qualifier that something's wrong. Right? If you don't feel right by the touch, if something doesn't feel right by you, if it's overly lingering or caressing, or you just feel weird about it, probably is. And then you should have reasonable loops of feedback to just flag that up. Yeah, because if it's you that you're feeling that, you're probably not alone. Yeah, so you should make the center, or there should be some kind of framework in which you can make that explicit. Yeah, But how does good touch feel? I mean, that's bad touch. It feels weird. And also, bad touch feels abrasive. It feels violent. I mean, I haven't even talked about the Ashtanga adjustments, the idea of adjusting a body into a shape that it doesn't do itself. That's an abusive touch, a serious abusive touch in my mind. I'm not going to talk about that much today because I've done that. I've done that to death, really. But it doesn't work. I mean, pushing a body further than it can go is a violence. It's a violence against the body. It's a violence against the person. And also, it's really hard to speak up. Even if you don't want it, it's really hard to speak up. I've been in the position. You don't want, for some reason, you can easily become a victim and not want to say no. I mean, well, for the obvious reasons, again, you don't want to ostracize yourself to the group. You don't want to offend the teacher. You're just not confident. You know, the teacher knows what they're doing, you think, and who are you to say? But they don't. If they're pushing you further than your body feels good in going, they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. But hard to speak up again. Yeah? And the best way to moderate this is just don't go to classes where you might be adjusted in this way. I found that solution to be the best solution from my very early years of practice. I don't want these kind of adjustments, physical adjustments. Yeah. So 2 types of dodgy or problematic touch: emotional problems and physical problems, literally the pushing too far. Yeah. Emotional ones are difficult to detect. Physical ones are easy to detect. So talking about bad touch, it feels weird. It feels violent. What does good touch feel like then? Well, good touch feels endorsing, affirmative, kind, gentle. Basically, good touch feels good. I mean, to be cliche or to utter a truism, right? It just feels right. It feels okay. It's not trying to twist your body into a shape that it's not already making. It's not trying to correct you, to make you right, to align you in a way that doesn't feel comfortable. It feels, as I said, affirmative. This is the bottom line of my use of touch. It affirms the current experience of your being, because that's the main thing we need. I turned up in yoga, as many might. I wouldn't say, well, I certainly wouldn't say I've been abused by touch personally, but I had a very negative feeling about my body, and being touched in an affirmative way. Not and I can think of one particular teacher not even trying to do anything. Hands on me firmly, because like if they're not firm, it feels a bit weird. But firm hands just allowed me to breathe and be with that person. An endorsing touch to my experience without trying to change it, without trying to change me, because that gives you the message that you're not right, that your body's not right, yet again, in the yoga class, where it's the one place where your experience should be right, should be okay. That was the best use of touch that I've ever experienced. And the body opens like that. Without pushing the body, it naturally opens when it feels embraced, when it feels seen, when it feels acknowledged to be okay as it is. So that's the use of good touch. Yeah. It's not violent, it's affirmative, it feels good, it feels comfortable. It's not trying to correct you or make you better in the eyes of the teacher. Yeah. And it certainly doesn't injure you. Yeah. How to protect against these injurious adjustments? Well, I keep on speaking about it, really. That just the fact that pushing a body doesn't work, that it just goes into the joints. And when you're trying to develop your postures, you're trying to mobilize muscles against each other, which only you can do. No one can push you into a posture if we're mobilizing our muscles. We're not just using flexibility. Of course, if you're going into flexibility, which is to really stretch into the joints, then teacher can push you further, but we're not really looking for that. So anyway, that's a slightly different subject or a tangential little alley that we can go down, of course. But yeah, coming back to touch again. To conclude, I don't have the answers, but to lose touch, we lose too much. So we have to keep, as students, being responsible to flag down the bad uses of touch, in such a way that we try to be thoughtful, honest, and reflective of our own experience. Yep. And as teachers, we have to build up a portfolio of touch, let's say, amongst students. So don't go rushing in. Don't jump on the student. Give them time to say no. Pause. Wait. Don't push them. Get a vibe. Use your intuition. Try and touch less and not more. Less is more potent, more powerful than touching loads. You don't want to interfere with people's energies too much. You want to touch them as little as possible, not as much as possible. And don't use touch in a corrective way. Use touch in an endorsing way to try and make their experience more comfortable as it is, as their bodies move. Yep. And build up touch slowly with a person like you would build a relationship with them. If you don't know the person, then we have a certain oral relationship with them, right? The way that we speak to them. But the same with touch. If you don't know the person, then you have a certain touch relationship with them. Now, we never build up touch too intimately. You should never touch the intimate regions of the body, ever. And I think, generally speaking, also includes the head. I don't touch the head much because it's a very intimate region of the body as well. Yeah. So we touch on the peripheries, not too close, with a firm touch. And we also don't touch too early on. Maybe when the person comes in, we give it time before hardly touching the person at all. And then we get a vibe for them. Yeah. Are they a person that has fear around touch? When we touch them, do they shrink away from it a little bit? We have to be sensitive and really look at the person. Or are they fine about it? Doesn't mean we go in, if they're fine about it, all cavalier and start pushing them and touching them, let's say willy-nilly, as we say in English. Yeah, but we're still respectful. Yeah. I think ultimately it does come down to respect, respecting that there's an individual, a sovereign, autonomous individual in front of us. Yep. And we don't just take advantage of that and start touching them. That they're a person. Yeah. So I'm sorry I haven't offered a solution, but I think that podcast really struck a note more than many in terms of changing my attitude to something. There's not many times I've been changed on a podcast in the way I think, but at that time with Bessel van der Kolk, I really was on the cusp of abandoning touch, thinking it was just too dangerous to use touch these days, and he changed my mind with it. But yet, the solutions of safeguarding touch around the consent cards or even the oral confirmation, I also find don't do the full solution either. Anyway, preserve touch, but perhaps preserve with increasing caution. Yeah? And don't try and push people. I shan't go on any more about that. Anyways, hope to see you at an upcoming retreat or workshop. I've got lots coming up. I've got the US next year in July, I think. I've got Tenerife in Purple Valley, Tenerife in April. I've got Sri Lanka, I think, in April or May. And Malaga at Christmas, the Spanish Malaga retreat that we did last year, which was such a success at Christmas again, and loads of other workshops coming up. So have a little look at the retreats page or the workshops page, and all the details should be there. And I really hope to see you and continue some of these conversations, because in the workshops, of course, we do technical stuff, but we also talk around these kind of subjects too. Right? There's a lot more to yoga than just the physical after all, but then you know that already. So I'll see you next week with another guest, and I hope you just have a great week this week. Bye for now.